I'm Michelle Margolis. I'm the librarian for Jewish Studies. Apologies for being in the car and with weird sunlight. But thank you all for joining us for this conversation with Sam Helmick. I'm really excited to hear from them. And I'm going to let Emily do the formal introduction, but just really glad that you're here and that you're joining us and really looking forward to hearing from you. So thanks, everybody. And thank you especially to Sam.
I'm Emily Bergman. I am the co-liaison to ALA from AJL. Thank you for joining us today. Before we introduce our guest, Sam Helmick, let me tell you a bit about AJL. In 1946, the Jewish Librarians Association was founded and composed of academic, archival, and research institutions. The Jewish Library Association, founded in 1962, emphasized work in synagogue, school, and community center libraries. These two organizations merged in 1966 as the Association of Jewish Libraries. In 2010, AJL became an affiliate of the American Library Association and is currently one of its 7 ethnic affiliates. Today, AJL is the leading authority on Judaic librarianship and a vibrant, volunteer-run, nonprofit professional organization that fosters access to information and research in all forms of media relating to all things Jewish. The association promotes Jewish literacy and scholarship and provides a community for peer support and professional development. For more information on becoming a member, please visit our website at jewishlibraries.org. Before I introduce you to the ALA potential candidate, presidential candidate, Sam Helmick, I want to say that we have 2 fabulous candidates this year. Both are interested in working with AJL. In fact, Sam spent about 45 minutes at the ALA meeting in January listening to our concerns with Kathy Bloomfield, Sally Stieglitz, and me. Ray has been in touch with me a couple of times since we met with him. AJL is lucky to have presidential candidates on our side. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Sam Helmick. Sam is the Community and Access Services Coordinator at the Iowa City Public Library. They are a current member of the ALA Executive Board and president of the Iowa Library Association. They previously served as chair-elect of the Freedom to Read Foundation and chair of the Iowa Governor's Commission of Libraries. They have served on committees for the network of the National Library of Medicine, the Stonewall Book Awards, the ALA Policy Monitoring Committee, Young Adult Library Services Association, YALSA, Michael L. Prince Committee, and the Reference and User Services Association, RUSA, Sophie Brody Award Committee. So let me step in here and tell you what Sophie Brody is. It's the award for the best adult Jewish book for the general reader. I was on that committee for 5 years, and I think Sean is our current representative from AJL. And on the YALSA Fundraising Task Force. Sam is a 2017 emerging leader, as well as an author, consultant, and instructor for social media marketing and graphic design. Welcome, Sam. So, how did you decide to become a librarian?
Oh, well, thank you all for having me today. And can I just honor Michelle for doing an excellent example of leadership where she's managing 2 things at the same time, and Emily for your kind introduction. I fell into libraries, friends. I never recognized that there was so much potential in libraries when I was a child growing up. I had no idea that they could change my life and that I would be sitting with the prominent advocacy and authority for Judaic librarianship. This is a wonderful moment, and I have to thank libraries for it. So I grew up in a small conservative town in Iowa, and I was homeschooled with a traditional Christian curriculum, which meant that some of my earliest memories was holding up paperback novels in my household that had been redacted with black ink, and I was holding them up to the sun to see what they actually said. And so I was used to a household where ideas were dangerous. Cultures and ideas outside of the ones in the home were to not be entertained, and it really hampered my development as a young adult, to be completely honest. So I went to a small conservative Christian college, and I had to do something called RSI, Responsible Social Involvement, to graduate. And at that point, I knew I wanted to work with books. It was going to be in a dusty basement. I was headed to law school. I was going to be a paralegal. I couldn't really speak to folks. I couldn't make a lot of eye contact. I had a very sheltered and kind of humble life. And my family did not agree with the library levy that had been passed in my hometown. It was very contentious the last third of my childhood, but they built it and it's beautiful. And I volunteered there. And it was the year of the summer reading program called To Catch a Reading Bug. Are you all familiar with like summer reading program themes? So the insect zoo from the Iowa State University Extension's office visited. And I have two technical like problems with this program. The first one is they brought a tarantula. And I don't do tarantulas, friends. I don't do spiders of any type. And then technically too, spiders are not insects. But I was able to answer people's questions, and I found out about this thing called Teen Advisory Board, and there were ebooks and there were programs and there were these beautiful things that were fomenting access and opportunity in my community. And this linchpin, like this one moment, this beautiful moment happened when the insect zoo came. It was like in August. It was like the culmination of the entire program for the summer. I was about to be done with my graduate course. This little came up to me and they said, Sam, if you hold the tarantula, I'll pet him. And I'm like, what? So either this was the moment where I fell in love with libraries. This was the moment where a little that had a different gender, different race, about 20 years younger than me, tackled a fear at the same time I tackled a fear. And we learned to about arachnids, and we learned that it's okay to gently touch them. And we had this really interesting moment where only in libraries this can happen, where two complete strangers have this learning opportunity. Or I passed out from fear in the lobby of the Burlington Public Library, and this has all been kind of an elaborate fever dream ever since, because that was the moment where I'm like, oh, people like me can do a 180. They can understand that ideas outside their own, cultures outside their own, make their life better. There's such a beautiful world out there that the library puts in your fingertips, and I was ready to do a deep dive. And it grew me emotionally, it grew me socially, it gave me confidence. It allowed me to give littles confidence by touching spiders. And that's how I went to graduate school and joined the library's Transform campaign and decided that I wanted to use my marketing and communications skills towards advocacy, because these are skill sets that I've been taking with me ever since. Whether it's obtaining library funding as the Governor's Commission of Libraries chair, or fighting for IMLS dollars, or now asking you all to share your stories, whether you vote for me or not, to remember to share your stories because they're powerful and they can help us rechange the narrative, the national narrative on libraries. That was kind of a windy story, but that one's mine. And I imagine you all have your tarantulas too.
That was amazing.
I hope it wasn't a fever dream, because that tarantula is still in my hand if it's true.
Why are you running for ALA president?
I'm running because I know that there's so many people in the world like me that just don't understand the values of libraries yet. I think that there are some that are obviously opposed to us and antithetical to us, but I know that there are several more like me that can do a 180. And I have really learned a lot as the president of ILA that had the second most library adverse bills in the nation last year, and also sitting on the American Libraries Executive Board, the American Library Association's Executive Board, where there are ways that we can bring people to the table, and there are ways that we can talk about our common goals, and there are ways that we can remind folks that libraries were always supposed to have their fingerprints into the process through reconsideration policies, sitting on public library boards, being an available and caring caregiver that's involved in the student's school library. These were never bastions or silos that were trying to exclude groups. And yeah, it's messy to invite everybody to the table, but we just actually dismantled 3 library ending bills in the last 2 weeks with a supermajority in the state of Iowa, because we keep gently insisting that this good work has to be done together, and by activating the public through our stories, none of the library adverse bills that would have destroyed all codified funding in the state could be done in the dark. And so it's pretty historical, but a couple of subcommittee meetings have been canceled and bills have been tabled, and I believe this is a skill set that I can bring to the American Library Association as your president. Not only because I'm tireless and determined that other people's lives can be changed for the better, just like my own, but because I've sat in positions of authority and responsibility to recognize that we need to hire strategically. As your president, not only would I support our board in hiring the next executive director to amplify and uplift the voices of membership, but I think it's time to re-examine as a fiscal officer. I've been looking and recommending that we hire the next director of development, which has been an open position for nearly a quarter of a century, so that we can have a human capital element when it comes to resourcing and funding the good work we have to do in a sustainable fashion. And then I think that while we all recognize as an affiliate and folks who are doing the work on the ground that a lot of policy and funding happens locally, I feel like in order for ALA to support that, we need to hire the Office for Legislation's director, which has been open for about 18 months. So I think it's kind of a twofold thing for me where we have to have structure, and that's what leadership kind of does. But then I also think we have to have energy and encouragement to make everybody a part of this movement, including the public that we serve.
Wow. What is your vision for ALA?
My vision for ALA is to see a more inclusive ALA internally and externally. I think that there's much more intersectionality to be done. One of my goals as an executive board member has been to support the work of the chapter relations office and to try to find some intersectionality with our affiliates, who I feel like are affinity groups in many ways, right? ARSL, AJL, ABOS, because there's an intersectionality to the work we do, and we're all doing a lot of the same great work. So whether it's like media relations or advocacy or coalition building or research, I feel like there are pockets of information and opportunity that we could create containers for to kind of cross-train and cross-promote. But I also think it needs to be more exclusive externally. I think that when I say our stories are worth sharing, I mean the stories that have yet to be written. I mean the stories about folks like me and folks like others that are being banned from the shelves. But I also mean the opportunity and the power that libraries hold every single day that belong to the public. I walk the floors of the Iowa City Public Library some mornings before we even open, and I'll think about the jobs that are going to be found, the languages learned, the recipes obtained. Nobody ever takes me up on taste testing services, by the way. I'm just putting it out there. But just all of the opportunity that's just on cold storage until the community comes in and breathes life into it. And I feel like they've forgotten they're part of this. And so if ALA could find as a professional association more of an opportunity to help change that narrative and get resourcing outside of our immediate partners, historical partners, that's what's going to make us thrive for the next 150 years.
Where do you see an association like AJL and its members within the broader landscape of ALA?
I see you everywhere. Again, it is humbling to sit with you all as the expert advocate and authority on Judaic librarianship, some of the oldest and most historic librarianship that's on the face of the planet. And so I think about the fact that that work has intersectionality with the Association for Rural and Small Libraries. In my tiny town in Burlington of 65,000, where we have a synagogue that actually serves about 30 folks, right? What's librarianship for populations there looking like? I don't think it's as robust as it should be. So I think about that intersectionality in small and rural communities. But then I also think about that intersectionality for like the International Relations Office and how a lot of the resolutions and the concepts that we're talking about as leaderships at the council level could be influenced and informed and supported by the good work that is done by AJL. But I also think just the agility of being a long-standing affiliate. I think that groups like ABOS, which is the largest growing affiliate in the ALA umbrella, could learn a lot about what it means to grow fast, but also to sustain and be strong for decades upon decades. And so I see a lot of probably leadership and advisory capacity. But then I also feel like as a member, I found my own way and I carved my own path. So I want to honor that. I want to honor the fact that AJL is actually supposed to tell us where they want to go and what this association for them is. And as a leader of this association, my job is to A, remove barriers and B, resource you in that good work. Because if I'd had folks tell me, whether it was Rainbow Roundtable or Emerging Leaders or Young Adult Library Services Association or the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable, what my role was supposed to look like specifically. I never would have found that beautiful intersectionality, and I wouldn't be in this room with you all today.
What do you bring to ALA that is unique and will help move it forward?
So I think I do bring that executive board level experience. So I think when you think about the fact that we've been transitioning for quite a long time pretty hard, right? So we pivoted to pandemic response services, we pivoted to hybrid conference and then also governance, but then we've also pivoted between an executive director to an interim executive director. What I bring to this slate is the experience that would be very useful in making sure that the transitions to the next interim director in the 150th anniversary, 2026, is as smooth as it can be. But I also think that I do bring maybe a bit of optimism in a time where it's very difficult to be optimistic. I want to bring an element of celebratoriness to the work we do, because I recognize that we are on the precipice of some major burnouts and mass exodus in our field, unmitigated mischaracterization of our field and censorship. And so I hope that my messaging and my positivity is both personally supportive, but also externally movement making and encourages other people to resource and support the work we do. Because if I get to do nothing else but say this in this campaign, I hope you'll take one thing from me. We are under scrutiny. We are targets. We are facing this because just by being who you are and doing what you do and holding tarantulas, whew, you have so much power and efficacy in the world. You wouldn't be on the radar if you didn't have power in the world. And so I think it's important for you all to remember that, because it's going to help you remind yourselves of your mission and your ability and your strength, and to remind you that you're all enough. And so if I get to say that to a few thousand people doing work I really care about, frankly, that's an incredible bonus for me. And that's what I think I bring to this campaign. And I didn't mean to get emotional about it, but yeah, it's incredible. It's very powerful.
I'm a little emotional about it. AGL wants to work more closely with other ethnic affiliates, but there aren't clear paths to doing that. Any suggestions?
Yeah, I am very fortunate to know a couple of presidents of affiliates, especially a few that I've talked about right now, that are either growing or really trying to find their foothold in the world, specifically ARSL and ABOS. And so I would personally make it my mission to kind of find some intersectionality for conferences and containers of cross advocacy training to kind of start fomenting and bubbling that up. I feel like as a leader, often what I do is connect two people on a shared mission and then resource them and get out of their way. I feel like the office, Odelos is hyper booked, and I feel like a lot of what ALA staff is trying to achieve is that intersectionality. But I do feel like as a leader, connecting with executive directors and presidents of the other affiliates and creating like mindful containers and just sort of creating the roadmap ourselves is the way forward. And I am an outreach librarian, so I know how this is done. You go to communities, you listen to their needs, and then you show them your value and how what you do fits in. AJL's been doing that for years. I know that the other affiliates see your value and recognize what you can do to support their needs. I think it's just somebody kind of coming into the room and saying, okay, let's make it so, and insert it into these learning opportunities and into these conferences. But then I think that has to be reciprocated. I feel like other affiliates should be able to come to you and say, hey, what do you need from us? What would be of good value to you? And so I've been thinking about some opportunities, particularly with ARSL and ABOS and a couple of the chapters that I'm super connected with, and curious if like we could invite each other into the space to make that so. Because I feel like once you leverage some of those smaller wins, it kind of builds momentum of inclusivity and understanding, oh, look what they're doing. That's really cool. Why didn't we think to do that all along? I'm also very heartened because as an executive director, I've been very interested an executive board member. I've been very interested in understanding ALA's relationships with the affiliates and whether or not I believe they're all being treated with the same weight and attention. And so I'm really, really pleased that past President Lessa is doing work right now to kind of examine that, because when I think of our affiliates, I actually think of you as affinity partners, right? Affiliates almost suggests like a different power dynamic than has I've always recognized you all to be, which is that you were partners shoulder to shoulder with us. And so I think examining that work, examining the relationships we have with each other, recognizing all of the power and might and opportunity that you bring to the American Library Association, and then just kind of piecing some of those puzzles together is kind of an immediate way forward that I think will have significant dividends.
All right. So you've thrown around some acronyms that you
Oh,
should tell us what they are.
thank you. I
Is
apologize.
ABOS,
So the Association for Bookmobile and Outreach Services.
right? And
And
was the
ARSL
one?
is the American Ruler Small Library Services. Yeah.
Okay. So before I ask the last question, I want to ask the questions from the attendees, because the last one is, kind of a fun one. So we have our current vice president is currently on the Sophie Brody committee, and he'd like to know, what did you learn from being on the Sophie Brody committee?
I think that it gave me a deeper appreciation for honestly book reviewing. Like I'm going to start at the professional level first. Like I've been on YALSA, it's the Michael Prince Award. I've been on the Stonewall Book Awards. I've done Midwest Awards a couple of times, but the intense and robust discussion for Sophie Brody really elevated me to a higher level. So professionally, I would recommend that reading committee to everybody. The other thing that it really taught me was inclusion, because I was the only Gentile on my committee. And I really wanted to make sure that that was A, useful to the group that I was there to serve, but B, that that was a lens by which I listened and learned and absorbed and incredibly inclusive. So inclusive. I can't tell you how many leadership and learning opportunities ALA has just impressed upon me again and again, how we are an inclusive and loving group. But then the third thing, Sean, for me was like, I knew this was coming. There was a lot of literature. I think, I was 2016. So there was a lot of like literature about the election and how it was coming up and what had been fomenting in our society. I'd already been defending the IMLS dollars for a couple years, which had been set at zero. And I thought, something's on the horizon. And so by the time I got to the executive board, I'm like, folks, we can't keep describing the water. We've got to start building rafts. We have to build tools. We have to make that in front of the paywall. We have to support membership, which is how United Against Book Bans got started. It was incredible too, because I came at it in my first executive board meeting. I'm like, oh, there's a little power in this room, because staff immediately moved to do United Against Book Bans. So I think what happened for me was the universe put me in certain positions at the right time to understand the literature that I was reading was going to prepare me for the future that we are all now facing today. So that was a long answer, Sean, but I think it taught me a lot of things that have actually helped me in the last 8 years, and I hope have helped others.
It's funny, when I was on, sometimes there were more non-Jews than Jews on the committee. So
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Why do we think so many rank and file librarians don't join ALA? And any ways to change hearts and minds?
Oh yeah. So again, I think when we talk about that inclusion inside and outside, like let's own the question from earlier. AGL should not have to be jumping these hurdles to find the intersectionality and partnership. We have our silos, and those silos are not exclusionary to within the confines of the professional association. We also have our silos outside, whether it's quote unquote professional staff or paraprofessional staff or support working staff, but also I think folks understanding what their role would be. What I think is fascinating about having both Ray and I as candidates is our relative age and experience. What ALA is teaching us with this election is that if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and contribute to a cause, there's a spot for you. But I'm not sure that that's overtly obvious to folks who have not been inside ALA, or overtly obvious to folks who have faced barriers or discrimination or exclusion. And so I think that there's a moment here to reflect, right? When I think about the leadership skills and the experience of pivoting, I've been calling for us to really pause and reflect on what's gone well during the pandemic response. Our agility for governance is incredible. Could we leverage that to build more containers of connection and support to each other in this digital world? How much more agile can we be when it comes to meeting the social and emotional and professional development needs of our membership? And so I think that as a candidate, I'm a big fan of reflecting and pausing, because we are such a we are such an achieving profession that sometimes I think we forget to do that. And that's why this question has been a long form question, because we don't pause to reflect on what keeps me here. And that by itself is the recipe by which we get other folks to join. And then I know this is a long-winded answer, and I appreciate you, Emily, but I do think we have to find a way to get the public involved as well, whether it's just sort of donating to ALA, APA, so the allied professional affiliates, because that would be what Ray or I are presidents of, besides ALA at the same time. And it has a completely different 503 structure. There's got to be a way that the folks around us are supporting us in our professional work too. How many of you, show of hands, have been asked the question, you had to get a degree to shelf books? It's not really great that my parents at the dinner table they're not. Me running for ALA president is not the feather in my parents' cap that it could be. And so I think we have to recognize that too, that we are also working in a group that's surrounded by folks who question our association, don't make us feel strong in supporting our own professional development, and are chronically asked to resource our own problems. And I've rambled there, but I think it's like ninefold.
So, so what about the messaging that might bring more people? What is the problem with ALA messaging that people don't want to join?
Right. So, I think when I think about like marketing classes I've taught, and marketing that I do as the public relations person for Iowa City Public, is that we fail often to make the marketing about the membership. Right. There's a whole bunch of us language, ALA language, and not a whole bunch of you language. And I'm a human being. I want my cereal boxes to have pictures of people on them, because people remind me of me. I want to feel really good about my professional associations and what it says about me if I'm a member of them. And I want my professional associations to applaud me and invite me and give me work to do. And so I do think that there's some just baseline messaging about one ALA, but that means you too. And we've got to, and that's why, again, like, it's our stories, you know? Libraries Transform was a wonderful campaign, and it changed my life, and it enabled me to help other people make that 180 transition like I did. But it didn't humanize us. And we need to humanize us, because at the end of the day, the problems that we're dealing with, those messy problems, are because we're human. But then those joyful stories that we are writing every single day are joyful because they're human. And that might feel like an oversimplification, but I really don't think it is. If you make the messaging about me, it makes all messaging better. So, like, I'm going to spill some library tea, but I've been answering membership emails all weekend, and one of them was talking about not recognizing what the value of their membership was for the American Association for School Librarians. And so I did a little bit of a deep dive, and I recognized what they were saying. It's like, everything I have access to that helps me every day is in front of the paywall. And I'm like, that's right. So then how do I make that feel good for you? And I'm like, you know what? It actually inspired me to recognize that small, rural, and drastically underfunded school districts have free access to this, because I'm willing with my dollars to become a member to this. And so it actually inspired me, and I got on and I added my membership today so that I can contribute to that. And so the story became about me. The person emailed me back and they're like, that's right, I'm contributing to this greater good, I'm making this happen, and so it became less transactional, and it really was a reminder of, not only do we give as member leaders and contribute through hours and time, but we provide an infrastructure and a staff available in order to have the greater good advocacy wise as well. So I think it's got to be not a defensiveness like you should pay for it because we're professionals, or a, well, I don't know what to tell you because I'm not a teacher librarian. It took like a 30-minute deep dive in me really kind of looking at what AASL has to offer on a national level and saying, okay, this is what I would put on the membership page if I were in that work, for that division. Because it needs to be very clear that it's about you. and that it requires you for it to succeed. Hope there's no AASL folks in here. That I didn't mean to cast any shade.
No, we appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to try very carefully to phrase, this is my question. I'm going to try very carefully to phrase it correctly. So I've been a member of ALA for almost 50 years. That's how long I've been a librarian. I was a student librarian, a student member first. And in those years, I have seen ALA get involved in issues not library related, which in the past has been to our detriment. And I'll give you the example. When ALA decided to get their foot in the Vietnam War, it turned the public against ALA, and then they didn't listen to us about the stuff that's important. All right. That's just a very long ago example, but for those of us that are sitting on this call, Zoom, we have seen several of the anti-Israel resolutions come through.
Yes.
And the latest one concerns me a lot because and I'm going to go back to your book banning because this is so serious. And it's libraries. We've got to get people to listen to ALA about this very serious issue from both our local school district, library board, up to Congress and hopefully the president, and somehow stop people from banning books because they don't like it. I think so. So the question is, what do we do about ALA making sure that we focus on the stuff that is our expertise and where we can make the most difference, and don't turn off the public because ALA is talking about stuff that's not related to what you and I do.
Thank you, Emily.
If I may, sorry, I'm going to just jump in because I've had a lot of listening and speak, I guess, on behalf of the membership, of the AJL membership, where there were a lot of concerns about some statements that came out, especially around anti-Semitism and whether it was legitimate, from people who are on a particular roundtable in ALA. And that was something that I know hit a lot of our membership, and it was in relationship to this issue. So I'm gonna, it's a really hard call, and I hate to throw it out there, but I feel like I have to represent our membership here in this way.
Well, I tried to, I could, Michelle. Thank you so much for sharing another part of this same concern of ours.
You both, I thank you for your bravery, and I want to recognize a couple of things here. The first is that I was the chair-elect for the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable when I got onto the executive board, and I was asked to step down because I couldn't serve both at the same time. And it was impressed upon me that once you get to that level, you were representing all of membership, right? And so there are a couple of hats as leaders we all play. Your hats as leaders of AJL is to represent a specific form of our field, a specific perspective of our field. And so I appreciate you holding space to do that. And I want to be as authentic with you as humanly possible, because that's the leader you're going to get if you vote me in, warts and all. I actually spoke with that roundtable about this resolution, and they had some concerns that there were 28 votes for and everybody else against, about 122, including mine against. And they were curious about what ALA was doing about this issue. And I think this is an important part of a conversation. I'm like, who is ALA to you? Right? Because if the leadership are speaking at that level, that this is not a discussion that they want to involve themselves in, I would suggest that the representatives, the leaders, our ALA, and so I think that there's a difficulty here that we have to hump over. I think that this is a messy conversation that we have to start addressing, kind of like how we encourage our communities to have hard conversations about book bans and library policies. I think we have to kind of turn that expectation into ourselves and ask if a specific roundtable, or me, intellectual freedom, like at what point does one aspect of our association run the risk of clouding out what the professional association is here to do and what the vast majority of the membership and its representation are saying. So I think, to be honest with you, to have a productive conversation forward, there has to be an acknowledgement there, right? That it doesn't serve us when we get too far afield of our profession. And frankly, I'm not quite sure it represents us when we do, when I look at the votes, right? Including my own, because where I enact social justice and changes through my work every day. I've had people asking me to run for office here in Iowa, and I'm like, I'm sorry, friends, I exact too much public and social justice as a librarian. I promise I'm getting this one back, but my point simply is, and my professional association, what I'm trying to do is meet the mission of furthering intellectual freedom, furthering access, and furthering learning for those that I serve by uplifting the profession and those who work inside it. And so for me, I think it is like an internal reconciliation, because I don't think this is healthy for us, that this is just a back and forth. And like you made the good point, Emily, like at some point, we're looking at like 50 years ago, we were having this problem when we're still allowing ourselves to get caught up in it. Right. So now it's an entire drawer of like tangled charger knots. And so I do feel like there's some work to be done internally there. But then I would also remind us that we have to read the room, not only our room, but also the external room. Penn America had their hearing at Senate in this, in the federal Senate House. Oh, shucks, was that October? And the only question that a couple of the representatives had was about the attacks in Israel that had happened like 3 days before. And when Penn America said we haven't formulated a philosophy on that, you had representatives get up and leave the room. They didn't ask about banned books. They didn't ask about intellectual freedom. They didn't ask about librarianship. They were trying to create a separate talking point to beat Penn America with. And so there's a part of me that kind of believes that if I get too far afield on things that are not directly related to the mission of ALA, all I'm really doing is creating hammers for which we all become nails. I don't know if I'm saying this very well, but it's incredibly complex, and it's inside the profession and it's outside the professional association and it's outside. And so as a person who wants to be a peacemaker, as a person who wants to bring people to the table, as a person who doesn't want to continue to see like a merry-go-round of why are we investing our time and our talents into conversations that aren't necessarily furthering the profession, I think that I might actually be willing to hurt my standing, hurt my campaign ambitions, and even hurt like any future holdings I might have in this association, because it's too important. And I think I might have done that last week when I was talking to this roundtable, because I really just tried to gently ask them, like, who do you think ALA is? Because this feels like an incredibly exclusionary perspective from my vantage point. And if we're all here together, I don't see everybody invited to the table. So that was a really long, rambly conversation, but I think it's because you all recognize this is complex, but it's going to take a couple of us being strong. And I think the executive board level, the council level, the executive committee level, and just saying, okay, what is the rubric by which we have these conversations? I did that as an executive board member when we were talking about Salman Rushdie, and being attacked. And I'm like, when do we decide that we make statements? Because I think a lot of members expected us to have a statement, and as you all probably recall, we did not. And it was at that point I asked, can we create a rubric by which we are consistently putting out conversational pieces as an association, whether it's military or terroristic conflict, whether it's somebody being attacked for their free speech, whether it's library like bombs or bomb threats, because that's something that membership should have access to. And I think that by itself is a small way we could start furthering this conversation forward and explain en masse why we're doing what we're doing and how it directly relates to the mission of the association. Thank you for giving me so much airtime on that. and for kind of letting
Sam,
me.
thank you so much for that. Very, very nuanced. And we sort of
Okay.
threw that at you. Neither of us planned it. And so I want to apologize again. And also thank you really for the depth of your answer. Statements are, in my mind, like just awful things sometimes. As a leader, it's so difficult. And I really appreciate your thoughts here. Thanks.
Michelle, you all deserve a better, more polished answer from me, but I appreciate you going on the journey with me because it's not an easy one. Yeah.
Yeah, the anti-Israel resolutions are a real problem for AJL, as you can imagine.
And where's that community? Like, oh, I'm just gonna completely assassinate my own campaign here, but it frustrates me because where's that community of care at that point? You know what I mean? So I remember, there was somebody who was having like a physical reaction. And both Ray and I, interestingly enough, went and grabbed them tissue and water because we're like, this is a person who is in real time struggling and feeling attacked. And it's something that I've asked our parliamentarian, and it's something I'm just poking around to power and asking questions about because I feel like our community of care standards, our conduct, our code of conduct standards, these are things that we're not examining in those moments, but are worthy of examination, right? Because they have traumatic effects. And I hope that that doesn't suggest that I'm trying to stop the voice of folks writing resolutions or that I don't want governance to happen. I'm not trying to become that kind of a campaign, that kind of a candidate, but there has to be a lens. If social responsibility is a lens that we want to add to our profession, then social responsibility in the way we write our resolutions is a lens that we have to apply. And I think that I just saw Sally in the notes saying that you would contribute to the cause, whether it's a rubric or maybe looking at that lens. So we have folks who are willing to give time.
Absolutely. All right, let's get a little less serious. What are you reading?
What am I reading? So Friends of Friends of Friends, Defining and Building Community by Lair Fernstein. It's just like a series of essays, and it's talking about the fact that like one of the women who revealed the sexual assault on Trump, but also like the CEO of Lambda Legal, and then also the health director of the Rosebud Sioux Reservation wrote these really cool essays about how their small acts had big impacts. Because I think so many times we all don't understand the power of what we're doing every day and how we influence and encourage each other. And so this has found me at a really good time because when you're running for a national office, you never quite feel like you're doing enough. And one of my favorite things in the world is to remind people they're doing enough. So this has kind of been inspirational for me at a useful time. Yeah.
So much.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Because that was my last one.
Mm.
Well, I do want everybody to know that this is being recorded, and if you want to come back and listen again, it will be on our on our website. And thank you, Sam, for joining us. We've really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, thank you for the privilege. If I can be useful to you, I've dropped my email and my website in the chat. You all have been wonderful, and I thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.